Hey everyone, let's sit together for a bit. Sit with your head, neck, and trunk aligned, and feel the space your body occupies inside. Bring your mind back from all the space outside of you and feel the flow and the touch of the breath in your nostrils. A wonderful sensation of being alive, of being supported by the prana. It flows with each breath, cleansing with the exhaling breath, energizing with the inhaling breath. Flowing, free, and deep. Just let your breath settle. Allow the natural changes to continue. As your breath becomes smoother and longer, more and more subtle. And as your breath settles, notice how your body also begins to settle. Feel into the top of your head and your forehead. And feel into the center of any tight spots you find, gently and lovingly, until those muscles just let go. And feel around your eyes and eyebrows. Into your cheeks and the corners of your mouth. Relax your jaw. Feel into your neck and relax the muscles in your neck. From your throat center, feel out along your shoulders toward your fingertips, through your upper arms, and through your forearms, into your hands, your fingers, and your fingertips. Relax your fingertips. Feel back into your fingers. Let go of your fingers. as if they could just float away. And feel back into your hands. Let your hands go. Feel back into your forearms. And release your forearms. Your upper arms. Your shoulders. And now from your throat center, feel down into your chest. Relax your upper chest and upper back. Feel into the muscles between your ribs. Relax your rib cage. Relax your rib cage. And feel into the center of your chest. And exhaling and inhaling from this space. Relax the center of your chest and feel down into your abdomen. Release your stomach muscles. Relax your navel center. Feel down into your hip joints. Your gluteal muscles. Relax your thighs. Release your calves and lower legs. Heel down into your calves and lower legs. Into the far reaches of the cave of space. Down into your feet and your toes. Feel the whole body breathe. Whole body at peace. Now feel that flow between your navel and your nostrils. Mind and breath flowing together. And just listen for the arising of your mantra in whatever way it comes to you. Feel a gentle song draw your mind more and more still. Let this warm, comforting stillness become full of that vibration. Now, feel that flow along the bridge of your nose between Ajna Chakra and Nasagra, where the nose bridge meets the upper lip. Mantra sound, vibration resonating in that space. All of the mantras lead, becoming subtler and subtler. Feel that flow through the left hand channel in the left nostril. Feel that flow through the right hand channel in the right nostril. Release left and right, and sink your awareness between these two into the Sushumna stream. Allow your breath to become very subtle and follow the vibration and presence of the mantra wherever it leads you, into a silent chamber or along the spinal pathway, or perhaps to a chakra. Follow that lead. Your breath ceases peacefully. Let it rest. And we'll begin again. Let the mantra thought again ripple the surface of your calm, peaceful mind. Let it flow. Let it join the flow of breath and prana so that your whole mind becomes full of that sound. And then let your mind turn gently outwards. Palms come to your face. And your eyes gently open. Let your heart fill your palms with blossoms of gratitude, offering these fragrant blossoms for the well-being of all creatures. And with thanks to the Guru light, linking us heart to each other and to our Swadharma. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to see these faces. It's one of the wonderful things about leading a seminar. You get to see everybody's faces as they come out of the practice. Each face becoming its own blossom. I realized last week when we seemed to be closing chapter 6 that we were only closing part 1 of chapter 6. Shantideva has more patience in store for us. And he's now going to go through a series of sort of case studies. Before we begin, though, before I forget, I wanted to let everybody know that I received word from Dr. Chris Chappell at Loyola Marymount University that they are now prepared to go ahead with the foundation of the Swami Veda Bharati endowed chair in Sanskrit. It will commence with the current person who is at the moment the assistant professor and Sanskrit teacher in that program. For the first few years, there'll be some fundraising to be done to raise the salary for that person. But one well-to-do member of our community has arranged in his will to endow the chair after he passes on. And so if you have an interest in contributing to that, actually you could message me. I'm going to be in touch with both Randall Krauss and Dr. Chappell, who's doing this. It would be nice to be able to kick this off when Swami Rithavan comes in the fall. He will be the next visiting scholar in the Himalayan tradition, a lecture series that Randall has created at Loyola Marymount so that a member of our senior teaching faculty comes each fall to do a series of lectures and workshops. And it's a wonderful experience. Really great people in the program. And I was there, I think, in 2016, and I had a lovely time. And I think the world of Chris. He's a wonderful Sanskritist. He's a very ecologically oriented person. Um, when I visited there, I got a lecture on the ecology of the whole area around where the university is near Santa Monica in the Los Angeles metro area. He's also, in academic terms at least, the reigning authority in America on Jaina tradition and has written a couple of wonderful books on Jaina yoga and its connection to Patanjali. In addition to having done some work on the Yoga Vasishta, which makes both him and the work very dear to my heart. He wrote the foreword to Swami Venkatashananda's translation of Lagu Yoga Vasishta years ago. And for a long time, I had been wanting to meet Chris. Just because he was one scholar who had done some work on the Yoga Vasishta. So for a number of years, I would arrive at SRSG and people would say, "Oh, you just missed Chris Chapel. He was just here." Or he's coming a week after you leave, something like that. And then our paths didn't really cross until accidentally on purpose in 2010, I think it was. I was there for the first time. If you ever have a chance to visit Loyola Marymount, it's a wonderful place. They have great programs. They actually have a yoga therapy certificate program led by Lori Fazio Rubenstein. And the people in the program are very good. Interestingly, the first time I was there, I met the son of John, I'm forgetting his name, the American disciple of Lakshman Ju, with whom Swami Lakshman Ju spent the last several years of his life in California.
It's John Hughes, Stoma.
John Hughes, yes. And his son, at one point, was initiated by Lakshman Ju, who supposedly gave him the entire Kashmiri tradition in one Shaktipada. So I had a chance to meet. He was this person was actually working as the secretary of the program the first time I went out there, and I asked him if anything if it had changed his life in any way, and he said, "Well, not yet. I still have an aspiration to become a monk someday." But it was really quite interesting. And on that same trip, I accidentally on purpose met Mark Dyczkowski for the first time. So it was a wonderful thing. So if anybody's interested in just let me know. So we begin with Chapter 6, Part 2, Specific Situations for Practicing Patience. It begins with verse 52. The mind is bodiless. By no one can it be destroyed. And yet it grasps the body tightly, falling victim to the body's pains. Now, this is interesting. There is a somewhat different notion of mind here in some respects. In the yoga tradition, we think of mind in several different ways, the largest of them being chitta, the great universal mind field, which is basically the matrix of the entire manifest universe, and which our individual minds are simply little waves in that ocean. And then we also have our thinking mind, manas, which I think is often what Shantideva is referring to. Although here, I think the mind he's talking about is much more what we would talk about as buddhi, the subtlest layer of the mind, the one that is the closest to whatever the great consciousness is. We'll just leave that a mystery for the moment and not call it any one thing or another. He says, by no one can it be destroyed, yet it grasps the body tightly, falling victim to the body's pains. This is just so much like how stressfully people live out their lives. The tension that people walk around with all the time as their body is grabbing on, their mind is grabbing onto their body and creating all of this distress in us. And the whole process of relaxation with which we begin our meditation practice is an effort to remember that this is the case and that Buddhi has the capacity to soothe the body's pain. Not necessarily to get rid of it altogether, because pain is an important signal, but to at least help to modify the way in which we suffer with it. And so the source of that pain, he describes here as the body's pain. And here I think the term body in this verse refers to the subtle body in the sense of obviously pranamaya kosha, but also manomaya kosha. And the way that that manomaya kosha experiences impulses to act based on our sanskaras and also creates sanskaras for the sake of our future. 53. Scorn and hostile words and comments that I do not like to hear. My body is not harmed by them. What reason do you have, O mind, for your resentment? Really good question. Why are you getting so upset? You know, we all know Trump is an idiot. Why does that bother us anymore? I mean, it's become an unfortunate fact of life. So there's a way in which we tend to grab onto our pain, and we have the self-awareness in our buddhi to be able to break that connection, to be able to say, why do we need to get upset about this? 54. Contempt and scorn that others show me now and in my future lives, since none of it can bite and swallow me, why is it that I'm so averse to it? It's a really different attitude towards what comes in your life. Once you recognize the universal operation of the theory of karma, all of a sudden, allowing yourself to get upset by it doesn't make much sense anymore. And it becomes easier and easier to exercise that sense of distance that we have in mindful awareness, to examine what's coming up in our mind, to ask ourselves, where is the suffering that is causing all of this disturbance? And what can I do about it constructively? What can I do that contributes positively to the situation? As usual, David's putting up a wonderful set of footnotes in the chat box. Verse 55. Perhaps I turn from it because it hinders me from having what I want. But all my property I'll leave behind, while sins will keep me steady company. Can't take it with you, What he's getting at here is the way in which our sense of expectation often is what creates our suffering. Life is not turning out the way I thought it should. My life's not going the right way. Well, what is the right way? This is where the question of swadharma comes in from a yogic perspective. not exactly a Buddhist concept. Swadharma refers to one's own, well, you could say sort of destiny, but I want to qualify that by saying that it is the path for the life ahead of you that you're living right now that has been created by the sanskaras you brought into this life. And when you act in harmony with that swadharma, magically sometimes the world gets behind you and makes life easier. It helps you do what you need to do. How many times have we heard stories about, people who suddenly have made a decision to come to India for the first time, to make that pilgrimage, and all of a sudden they have the means somehow. Or they need to go to school and they have struggled and struggled and struggled, and all of a sudden the money is there. So when you are in harmony with your swadharma, life flows with you. When you fight your swadharma, you're swimming upstream. So if it feels like you're swimming upstream, it's a really good time to sit back and think, now, what's going on here? What am I doing? I wish I could have done that in my 20s. In my 20s, I was so turned around. I could not figure out, despite all of the evidence that I had, that I was a gay man. And I kept looking for the right woman, and I just couldn't find her, couldn't find her, couldn't find her because she doesn't exist. Well, she kind of did exist, actually. And in the end, I kind of did find her. I found a wonderful person, a woman who was raised in a family where she was raised to be a boy. And she had a very sort of boy-like body and attitude as well. She was into sports, she was a gymnast, uh, and we had all sorts of other things in common. We loved folk music and folk dance and stuff. We had a great time. We were all ready to get hooked up and married, and then I started falling in love with my best friends over and over again, as I was wont to do. And it wasn't until I was 32 that I could finally recognize what was really going on. And she played an important role in this one day. She took me aside in the kitchen. She said, "Are you going to just worry about this for the rest of your life? Or are you going to do something about it?" She kind of kicked me into therapy. God bless her for it. And it meant the end of our marriage plans, which was sad and very disappointing to her parents. And footnote, we subsequently found out nobody ever does that. They never call off the wedding, which just seems absolutely crazy to me. It's so cuckoo. We called it off, and if I have one regret in life, I might have two regrets in life. One was hurting her. Obviously, it hurt to end that expectation of marriage. And she was very wise about this, very emotionally intelligent. She said to me, "I have to get really mad at you for a while, so don't call me until I call you." And I thought, I'm never going to hear from her again. But 18 months later, she called me. I said, "Okay, I'm done. We can be friends now." And we are. I mean, lovely relationship ever since. It's beautiful. The other regret was that I didn't have the ego strength to deal with Swami Rama while he was in the body. I only got to that point the year that he left the body. And thank God he decided me to make a pilgrimage that year. It all worked out for the best. But I mean, that's just my own personal experience of how my relationship to Swadharma turned and how life began to flow in the right way when I turned in harmony with my Swadharma. It isn't always easy to discern what that is. Very often you need help from a spiritual guide, from friends and other people who know you very well, from your most intimate relationships, from the people from whom you can hear that kind of stuff, even if it is sort of counter to your expectations. And it'll change everything. But when it happens, and a lot of your petty frustrations will melt away at that point because you have moved your expectations in harmony with how your life is meant to go based on how you have designed it in the past through your sanskaras. Verse 56. Better far for me to die today than to live a long and evil life. However great may be my length of days, the pain of dying will all be the same. 57. One man dreams he lives 100 years, 100 years of happiness, but then he wakes. Another dreams an instant's joy, but then he likewise wakes. 58. And when they wake, the happiness of both is finished, never to return. Likewise, when the hour of death comes round, our lives are over, whether brief or long. 59. Though we be rich in worldly goods, delighting in our wealth for many years, despoiled and stripped as though by thieves, we must go naked and with empty hands. Can't take it with us. The only thing you can take with you is that mantra, that one vibration that leads you deeper and deeper into the cave until you find the source of the light. And given the nature of our expectations, that determines a lot about what our death will be like. And how we handle those expectations is an important part of being well at the end of our life. People can actually, and I've often told the story about how a friend of mine, reached the end of her life and thought of her death as a great adventure. I can hardly wait to die, she said. What an adventure. So often people have great fear about the unknownness of what death represents. And I mean, it's not something to take lightly. Just about everybody has some quantity of it. Swami Veda actually said to us a number of times before he left the body in the last years, he said, I expect to have fear of death at the end. I'm not sure he did. He woke up with some angina that he somehow knew intuitively he could not master this time, and got himself right into a meditative pose and immediately went into samadhi. Among other things, I think he probably felt that the situation was too emergent to waste time getting scared because he knew what was going to happen. But it's going to be unknown for all of us, however it may come to you. And how well you cultivate your mindful awareness goes a long way towards your ability to embrace that mystery without quite so much fear. That's a great blessing. Swami Rama used to say, the death of the body is where the journey of love begins. In his wonderful little book, I can't remember the title of the book. Sacred Journey. Sacred Journey. verse number 60. Perhaps we'll claim that by our wealth we live, and living gather merit, dissipating evil. But if we're ruthless for the sake of gain, it's evil we'll gather, dissipating merit. 61. What use then will our lives have been when all is so degenerate and spoiled? What use is there in living such a life when evil is the only consequence? If, when others slander us, we claim our anger is because they harm themselves, how is it we do not resent their slander when it's aimed at someone else? Another one of these interesting questions about our reactions. 63. If we bear with such antipathy, if we bear with such antipathy, remarking that it's due to other factors, why are we impatient when they slander us? Emotion, after all, has been the cause of it. 64. Even those who vilify and undermine the sacred doctrine, images and stupas, are not the proper objects of our anger. The Buddhas are themselves untouched thereby. Yeah, I mean, those things are there for the sake of us, for those who have not yet realized. They're things that help us as stepping stones along the way. But they're still just things in the world. 65. And even if our teachers, relatives, and friends are now the object of aggression, all derives from factors just explained. This we should perceive and curb our wrath. Shantideva is making an argument here for saying that anger is never justified. It's a tall order for most of us, especially those of us that are very much committed to notions of social justice. And a lot of times we spend a lot of effort justifying our angry feelings. Why do we do that? Well, because they're so painful. And they're just as painful for us to carry as they are for others to hear. I've often told the story of the process of consultation with my therapy partners, where some of the same things that had happened in the past begin to resurface in our organizational life. And I was angry, wondering whether we had learned any lessons from our previous work. And I had to ask myself one night, is taking this anger back to the group going to help us get over it? Well, no, clearly. It's just going to make the situation more difficult. And at that moment, the anger just dissipated. It just poof, went away. Thankfully. So after a while, as you examine angers that arise mindfully, you gradually get to the point where you can let go of them. And as you build up a certain resilience to being hooked, to experiencing what Children calls the shenpa, the thing that hooks us. The more we deal with the things that hook us, the more steady our emotional state remains. This is how you build upeksha, how you build an unshakable emotional stability.
Vistoma.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering if anger can be a useful emotion if it leads to rightful action. It can be a motivator for, um, compassion or service.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, look at Swami Rama. Talk about somebody who could perform anger as well as anybody on the planet. He could do that very well. But it wasn't coming out of emotional disturbance. It was coming out of him because people were not listening and he needed to raise the volume. It was coming because people's sense of expectation and, their own ignorance was getting in the way of being able to follow their swadharma. And so those moments he would get angry, and very often that would do the trick. And, you know, you look at the different responses that people had to his anger. You look at Swami Veda, Swami Rathavan, they never they never got pushed out of balance by it. Swami Veda would just say, Ji Swamiji, Ji Swamiji. Okay, sir, okay, sir, okay, sir. No matter what. Even if he didn't understand what the deal was at the moment, that's what he would say, because he knew it's not going to help to get disturbed here. And besides, he's going to be testing me. If you have a sort of a designated guru, it's a great wealth because you know you're going to be tested. So you know when your guru is angry with you, you better pay attention to something. So yes, I mean that anger is an emotional energy that can be channeled in a constructive direction. And as I've said several times, one of the things that I really loved about what happened here in Minneapolis is that while in the beginning people were shouting and screaming and acting out with the ICE people here in town, eventually they ended up just singing. And that helped to send that anger in a constructive direction in terms of how the demonstrations unfolded. It's a beautiful transformation because I saw a few times when it was very close to getting quite out of hand. Uh, just down the street from where I live, actually. Does that make sense, Emilio?
Yes, I mean, I remember Swami Veda would walk into a room where a bunch of us were sitting, and in an angry way, he would say something like, "Nobody's breathing right here. Nobody's sitting right." And yeah, I mean, at first it was a little bit disconcerting, but I think eventually the point would get across. And
Yeah.
I mean, we're still working on our breathing, and but that sort of triggered
I
something.
love I love those times at SRSG when before he was confined to a wheelchair and he would sneak into the morning practice and he'd just sit in a corner and try to sneak in so nobody would see him. And in the middle of it, he would stand up and say, "Okay, stop." And he'd just rearrange the practice for the morning in the same kind of way. He was such a skillful person. He could do that in a way that got the point across clearly, sometimes loudly, without really screaming at people, you know? Very skillful that way. She goes on and he and she, whatever, goes on. They go on in 66. Beings suffer injury alike from lifeless things as well as living beings. So why be angry only with the latter? Rather, let us simply bear with harm. 67. Some do evil things because of ignorance. Some respond with anger, being ignorant. Which of them is faultless in his acts? To whom shall error be attributed? What a fantastic question. To whom shall error be attributed? We spend so much time judging the behavior of ourselves and other people. Judging, 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 judging. When in fact, there are always layers in any situation. And there are attributions that can be made in different directions at every layer. So every situation is complex and multifaceted like that. And it happens because people's sanskaras interact in a certain way and create a drama that was meant for all of them to present a situation that they need to deal with and get through. So it's not a matter of figuring out who's right and who's wrong all the time. There's a certain amount of stuff that Trump is right about. We tend to throw that baby out with the bathwater. And there's so much bathwater, admittedly. So it's really hard to say sometimes where the error really lies. Rather, why did I do evil in the past that caused me harm at others' hands? All that happens is the fruit of karma. Why then should I now be angry? I think this is one of the most liberating things about the theory of karma. Our disturbances in life, once you accept that the disturbances in your life are things that you somehow created in some past, this life or another, then it's easier to get through them. To just say, okay, we got to get through this. How can we do it better? How can we do it with more peace? How can we do it more lovingly, with greater compassion? 69. This I see, and therefore, come what may, I'll hold fast to the virtuous path and foster in the hearts of all an attitude of mutual love. For when a building is ablaze and flames leap out from house to house, the wise course is to take and fling away the straw and anything that spreads the fire. In fear that merit might be all consumed, we should at once cast far away our mind's attachments, tinder for the fiery flames of hate. It's a great metaphor. Fling away the straw and anything that spreads the fire. How do you do that? And the answer that Children gives in her commentary is shamatha, pacifying, which is the word in Buddhist tradition for our technique of meditation that we use in the Himalayan tradition. In meditation, she says, we recognize when our mind wanders and simply return to being present. To facilitate this process, we can add an additional step. We can label the thoughts thinking. This technique gently and objectively dissolves the stream of habitual chatter and its underlying beliefs. Like removing the tinder from a burning building, it deflates the powerful surge of energy before we become inflamed. Now, I part company a little bit with her on this because there's a certain school of mindfulness instruction, Vipassana instruction, that wants to make people label what they're observing from their mindful awareness with words. Now I'm thinking, now I'm feeling something in my foot, now I'm feeling something in my seated posture, blah, blah, blah. And people end up sitting there talking to themselves the whole time, which is not really what mindful awareness is about. But the point is that it is that mindful awareness and going into allowing ourselves to be led into a state that becomes vipassana. This is a wonderful word. Vipassana in Pali is the transformation of vipassana in Sanskrit from the verb root pash, which means to see. Seeing things. Being mindful is seeing the situation clearly. Seeing things for what they are. And so in the state of, for example, mantra japa, when we're doing our mantra japa, that mantra japa gradually leads you through the disturbed thinking processes in your mind and back to eventually a condition of a single focus that eventually becomes very silent and very peaceful. It's the thing that really pacifies the disturbance that's trying to arise in your mind. And as that becomes more a person's habit, the structure of your emotions changes. And I mean, we know from experience that this is the case. We know from our teaching tradition this is the case. And we also know from neuroscience. Richard Davidson wrote a wonderful book called Changing Emotions or something like that sort of summarizes his life's work in the process of observing the structural changes that occur in the brain with the increasing use of mindfulness and meditation. And these changes are incredibly profound, even at the physical level. And they result in the eventual emergence in our personality of these qualities that we refer to as Brahmaviharas. As David says here in the chat, the Brahmaviharas grease the wheels for the Swadharma. Very nicely said. So I think rather than labeling the thinking processes that are going on as a way of quieting them down, following mantra japa should take us to an eventual experience of vipassana. This was always Swami Veda's argument with people who tried to argue that vipassana and mantra meditation are two different things. He said, no, they're two facets of the same experience. Mantra meditation, the reason we start with mantra meditation in our tradition is that it leads you into that kind of awareness more quickly than trying to do it just sort of right off the bat. Verse 72. Is not a man relieved when, though condemned to death, he's freed? His hand cut off and ransom for his life? Enduring likewise merely human ills, am I not happy to avoid the pain of hell? Children says, it's painful to refrain from anger. It takes courage. Certainly it can be. When the hook of Shenpa is strong, we long to talk indignantly among our friends, to yell at our foes, and fuel the anger with our thoughts. Shantideva acknowledges the pain of not striking back by comparing it to the horror of having a hand cut off. But the pain of refraining is well worth it. It's like losing only a hand instead of our life. It allows us to calm down and avoid the pains of hell. And at a certain point, given the depth of your mindful awareness, it's not so painful because it becomes clear that the reaction that you're having doesn't make any sense. And even if it does sort of make sense in your own thinking process that's trying to justify your feelings, it still is unlikely to create any useful outcome in the situation. So why keep that? And once you get to that point where you can say, why am I doing this? It just evaporates. The anger and the pain with it just evaporates. And that's part of burning sanskaras. If pains of even this my present life are now beyond my strength to bear, why do I not overthrow my anger, cause of future sorrows and infernal torment? She says in commentary, the message here is the same. By putting up with relatively mild short-term suffering of the detox period, we forego far greater agony. The key is taking responsibility for our actions. Our future well-being depends on what we do right now. I have this person I've been talking to for I think 4 years now. Lady who got sexually abused. Unfortunately, her ability to take any legal action about that was forestalled by the perpetrator, who obtained an order for protection against her, which carries with it a jail sentence if she does anything. And in the Ahimsa organization, we feel constrained to be able to do anything because if we do it, they're going to know it came from her, and it'll visit nasty consequences on her. So I've been working really hard on this problem with her of how attached she is to her expectation that somebody has to stand up and beat this person or kill him or, whatever other things her thoughts are straying to at the time. It's very, very difficult to get her to the point where she can let go. Every once in a while, you see a little glimmer of it, a little glimmer. But those are really few and far between. It's really tough. It can be so hard. So hard. When I used to do therapy with people who had been sexually abused, I used to tell them, forgiveness is the goal, but I'm absolutely aware not everybody can get to the goal. You don't have to get that far if you can't do it. And some people, it seems, can't do it. If you can get to that place, then the freedom you feel is enormous. Enormous. It becomes that kind of transformation in a person's swadharma that opens the way for them to grow spiritually, and often very quickly. But it's not easy. Not easy at all. And if a person can do it, it takes a good deal of time. I think the people who have stuck with it in therapy, a lot of them have taken 10 years or more. So that's a big one. That's a tough one to deal with. But some people are up to the task. And then if you work with the perpetrators, then you're also in a situation where actually both parties have to learn to forgive themselves. The victim has to forgive themselves for having been deceived and having been taught to trust somebody they couldn't trust. The perpetrator has to forgive themselves for perpetrating an enormous violence on somebody. That's pretty hard to do. But again, there are some people that manage to do it. And very often those people are wonderful folks. So I used to tell my grad students, don't go into doing therapy just with victims of sexual abuse. It's not okay. You're going to get an unbalanced point of view if you do that. If you're going to work with the victims, you also need to do some work with the perpetrators. So you understand both parts of the interaction and what happens. And there's important work to do on both sides of that. Everybody likes to be in support of the victims because it justifies everybody's anger, right?
Stoma,
Yeah.
does the victim's ability to forgive have any impact on the perpetrator's karma?
Oh, what a great question. So many of these kinds of very complex and deep karmic relationships that we have with people are strongly bilateral. I can't see how it wouldn't affect the perpetrator. If a person really reaches a point of forgiveness, it means they have worked through all the pain of their victimization and especially all the pain of their self-blame about what happened. And they have come to the place where they are able to really let it all go. And it just becomes, oh yeah, that happened. And that's all there is to it. And that's a really big deal if you reach that place. That kind of level of forgiveness is really, I mean, it's incredible to see that happen in somebody. And I've seen it a couple of times. And I've seen it in one person who I met very early in my therapy career, a father who was afraid he would physically abuse his young boys, when in fact, what he actually needed to deal with was having been sexually abused by his own father. And he didn't realize that until he started beginning to work on parenting his own sons. You know, I had given him some affirmations, developmentally appropriate affirmations to use with his boys. In particular, an affirmation that said, "I'm glad you're a boy." Because one of the weird things about males, I don't know if about other cultures, but certainly in American culture, the first thing they ask when the boy comes out of the womb is it a boy? And that's often the only good thing that's ever heard about a person being male until they reach adulthood. If you look at the folk literature on boys and girls, it's pretty bad regarding boys. And so I asked him to do this affirmation with his boys, just sit down with them every so often and just say, "I'm glad you're a boy." He couldn't get the words out of his mouth. Every time he tried to say them, his mouth would just close up. And we were talking about this in session one time, and he said, I can feel it happening in my throat now. So I said, okay, pay attention to that. Pay attention to that feeling in your throat. What are you feeling? What comes to mind as you pay attention to that? And all of a sudden he began to remember being abused orally by his father. And so obviously we spent a long time working on that. It was a number of years. But he did reach a point where he could let go and forgive his father. And his sons flourished. They did beautifully. He never beat them up, and they grew up. In fact, I think they're probably middle-aged by now. That's how long ago this all occurred. But it was miraculous to see that. So yes, I think the answer to your question is yeah, when a victim gets to the place where they can really forgive, it does affect the perpetrator. And I think vice versa as well. Um, you know, it yeah. Okay for now?
Thank, thank you, Samaji.
Good. Verse 74. For sake of gaining all that I desired, 1,000 times I underwent the tortures of the realms of hell, achieving nothing for myself and others. The present aches are nothing compared with those. And yet great benefits may come from them. These troubles that dispel the pains of wanderers, how could I not rejoice in them? In her commentary, she says, when I read this, I'm reminded of the earlier part of my life and the suffering I went through around relationships. There was the pain of getting into them, even more pain getting out of them, and a tremendous amount of energy expended in between. Well, yeah, of course. Likewise, our careers and the other things we pursue can feel like the tortures of the realms of hell. And what do we have to show for it with the passage of time? We have even stronger habits of striving, craving, hatred, and revenge. If we keep strengthening these old patterns, our present aches are nothing compared to those to come. In other words, the experience of our painful or kleshas that we experience in the period in between bodies. The experience of heaven or hell is a dream, and in the yoga tradition, a dreamlike experience of our own sanskaras. This is our chance to do something different. We've spent lifetimes trying to find happiness in ordinary sansaric ways. Now let's try working straightforwardly with the mind itself. Let's also recall that our ordinary human suffering has value. It can humble us and teach us compassion. The pain we go through while changing old habits is not only worth tolerating, it's worth celebrating. How about that? I feel exactly that way. I managed to work through a few things in this life. And now, from the perspective of age, I can see what was going on. And I do celebrate it because it's given me a greater ability to have compassion. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. I've been a good lawyer, I'm sure. If I'd have gone to law school, I would have ended up on the bench, actually. I would have gone to be a judge, I'm sure. I had an uncle who was a judge. And I would have really appreciated being in the appellate system. But I'm so glad I decided to become a therapist. And it's funny because I called my dad up when I decided to look for getting a graduate degree in psychology. And I said, hey, Dad, I think I've decided to study clinical psychology. What do you think of that? And he said, oh, why do you want to sit around and listen to other people's problems all day? What good is that? So at that time in my life, getting my father's disapproval was my check mark of approval. So that was my signal to go ahead because anything I could do to poke my father, I would do. We had a contentious relationship, especially early on. We learned
Wouldn't
we learned to make
wouldn't
it.
being a lawyer also being inundated with other people's problems?
I could be, and I suppose probably I would have ended up that way. But I'm just really glad it went the way it did because it really taught me a lot about compassion and about dealing with people's emotional life. And it gave me an ability to learn how to maintain equilibrium, to how not to take things personally when other people were throwing emotions my way, it's pretty hard to get under my skin. It can be done, but it's not easy. um, so I do really celebrate all of the trouble that led to this awareness, because it's put me in a place to appreciate what spirituality really is, and to really, really understand how the karmic process works. And that becomes a reason for not hanging on to this stuff, which gives you just enormous equanimity and confidence. Even if you do the wrong thing, there's going to be some important learning in there. And if I could help younger people make good use of failure, I think that's a wonderful thing for any mentoring person to do. Failure is great information, and we seldom give it the respect that it's due. So our suffering in the end is a key part of helping us wake up. Wake up to the importance of awareness. Wake up to the incredible significance of compassion and how it motivates us to act in this life. I think this is a good place to close for this evening. So we'll start from, I think, verse 76 next time. And yeah, really, it's a beautiful life, even in terms of the suffering. People wonder whether Jesus suffered on the cross. And the human part of Jesus felt some pain, to be sure, no question. But I don't think he suffered. I really don't. And he wasn't repaying the sins of all mankind by the sacrifice of one life. That's a ridiculous proposition. And I don't think it's a good idea, because it gives everybody else a blank check to just go on misbehaving all the time. No, I think that's bad theology. Redemption theology is silly, and I don't believe it. What he did do was to show a path to healing through the endless process of going deeper and deeper and deeper into our vulnerability and our compassion. That was his whole thing. Paul, made up all this other theology and all those guys. Jesus was about feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the lonely, be there for the people who are suffering. It's the same thing Shantideva is saying. It's the same thing. No difference, really. It's beautiful. So let's take 2 minutes to just reflect on this beauty. Oh, Tat Sat. Brahmarpanamastu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Have a beautiful week, everybody. We'll see you next Monday, and we'll love each other again.
Thank you, Stoma.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Somaji.
As we say in Hungarian, Szívesen, from the heart.
Mm.